You one side of the meeting.
Okay.
On this one.
No.
Yeah.
We want to.
I was looking at it. I'm doing this, Jesse. Hey, Jesse.
Really? That's Leo levels.
Hi.
Thanks. I remember we met in person before. Like,
You did agree for the class.
Well, I sent you with the Woodland MOU, MOA, whatever, subcontract agreement. Did I? Did you not see or did I not send it? Because you've been very fast, so it's making me wonder if I actually pressed send or something.
I was like, well, I was trying to clean stuff up.
This has been something that's been.
But sometimes I open things and I start to unmark it, but
This is
it's someone like, so I'm not.
just a sub-recipient agreement.
Oh, last week?
Yeah.
I see it, and so I am glad you said that, because I apparently might get it read, and then it wasn't in my list. So
Should I sit up at the?
Yeah, we can spot for you.
And it's very tedious. It's really for federal compliance purposes that it's written in the way it is.
Okay. Hey there.
I'm hoping we're really close to actually finding it. Getting it done, getting it off our books, because we've had this grant for forever.
Okay.
It's entirely meant to be passed through the city of Woodland.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
No, I can't always get it done with that either. With that grant.
And we would want to activate the funds. I don't think, but I think probably another year before the grants funds expire. That would be ridiculously embarrassing.
So we're getting the grant funds then.
Yeah, the grants are going to be.
Okay.
But we need a sub-recipient agreement.
Yeah.
We need them to say they won't bribe any federal officials.
Right.
And haven't bribed.
Okay.
Yeah. They won't spend any money on.
Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. It's more just.
Yeah.
The awarding agency wants to.
Oh.
Mr. Cadell, how are you? Welcome. Nice to see you, Brad. Welcome to our meeting. Your public transit district.
How are you?
Good to see you too. That laugh our way through the whole. Yeah.
That's right.
It's on wheel ovens. Nice to see you. Yeah, likewise. It's good to come up.
Hey. And then you keep your backpack.
Yeah. For this.
Not a good spot.
No, it's just all right. Yeah, there's not enough. My parents back here.
Where are you back in there? Tom, would you like some water?
Yeah, sure would. I don't worry about it.
Did you get my text?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's okay. We're gonna love that.
Right. All right. And Jessie just informed me she's running a few minutes late, but as far as I know, everybody else will be here.
Well, it'll be nice fun to have a full board.
Yes.
gonna wear a tie tonight, but I just gotta keep my collar size is grown during COVID, so I don't have a single shirt now, office shirt that I can actually.
Oh, that's
button
hilarious.
me.
It's like, you know, printing.
Hello, Mr. Grandad, how are you tonight?
It fulfills the purpose.
Very well, thank you. Yeah, they're always happy to see you in your place. With a bright, shiny face.
Yeah, just making it through the evening.
We celebrate democracy every time we get together.
That's right, that's right.
Thank you for that.
So I don't know if you saw, Tom, we have quite a few public comments that came in, we emailed them, so Heather printed them out as well.
If they were emails within the last 2 hours.
Yeah, I think we usually email them around 4. Yeah,
Okay.
so.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
We're passing on demand to Davis.
yeah.
Oh.
There's a backstory, as there always is.
I mean, wouldn't many of these people qualify for current?
Yeah.
But not all.
But not all.
Yeah.
Mr. Candela? Still distributing the Bibles? Hey, weren't you distributing Bibles?
The Bibles.
Good.
I can go on application and join that.
It's kind of what
You go to the motels?
We give about,
And convert this to an annual.
well, we got 140.
I have a number of hours. Meeting to have numbers to run.
I just,
Well, thank you for your commitment to that activity.
It's the hours.
Looks like a doctor here, though, just so that we don't
Right, so that's why I care, but if I were a.
Josh, good to see you, buddy. Like everyone else.
Yeah.
Oh. We're done.
I know.
I realize. I shouldn't be. Under that calculation. I had to do a rough one. Assuming, just, the midpoint of the measure, it's very well, the number of.
I think.
Well, each of them has a purpose for a different reason.
Like a micro transit service, you're going to, all the trips are kind of sporadic. So, but we're only charging $5. So I guess we're not getting.
Yeah, you guys were there. We had it.
Yeah. You're like,
But when you say that,
Well, it's not like, well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it was. That's how it was downtown, that's for sure.
Which is good.
But they should use the response.
So round trip.
Yeah. Or perhaps. If you would find so.
Jesse would be
Yeah.
We have a simple start.
Motion second.
I'm sorry, that's good.
Right. But of course, they're like.
No,
Correct.
Jesse's
But I
right.
guess my only thing is that.
You make a forum, Don.
really not.
And so it's not.
It's like the last day.
You got 1 more minute.
Yeah, well, we got that.
I'm gonna wait for you to sit down there.
No, we would have.
Yeah, that is good.
Right, in different reviews, and then be able to explain.
You know,
why
and I
they-
knew,
I agree.
gentleman who, everybody knows, unannounced gentleman. No, not really, you know,
We had one micro, I'll get one theory, so It might be a whole lot of.
Not again.
Like it's-
But
that's
usually
not
I'm
what-
one.
That's worse. Right.
So.
Sponsor?
Oh, no, I'm good, thank you.
So- It's, you were doing.
Yeah, well, terrible thing.
Right. And South with more stuff. I mean, it's just not. We need to do that.
No, no.
That kid keeps wanting out to. You don't think so.
Yeah. So,
You can't be that anti-social around.
yeah.
It's more solid everything here.
It's good, we had our deputy chief retired today.
Oh.
So, our police department. So, yeah.
How are things going?
For 25 weeks.
Better. We had a party. Ours retired about 25 years. We didn't have a party for him. We just gave him the resolution.
Yeah.
We lost the deputy chief and one of our lieutenants the same night. They had started the same week, 6 days apart, and then decided to leave the shop.
Yeah. Long time.
Yeah, it's steps towards what.
Especially at the police officer.
Tragic situation all the way around,
So,
actually.
Community response has been pretty strong, I feel like. I talked to my dad a little bit.
No, actually, I worked for CDCR for a few years and. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
And
Saw you and Josh.
individuals retirement.
So I was like, all right, I know you guys are, but just, I know it's a
They
lot.
actually die within of the next like 4 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
That's true, but all kinds of people, isn't it? You get to use taking care and you just.
Well, but you can imagine that you're used to operate your body.
David is a
operate
friend.
like that, which are, police officers.
Yeah, I'm like their deputies, like,
Which I appreciate.
it's just different when you.
Operating. Are we ready? Yeah.
What about, hey, Lucas walked in when I wasn't looking.
Hey, Lucas, how are you?
I'm sneaky. I am all right. How are you?
Good, happy to be here.
Oh, where am I? I'm in your hair. You could be here.
Actually, no, I don't want to be here. No.
It's always out of frame.
For that, yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. You know, when you took it.
Ready to go?
Hi.
I am.
Are you rotating? Oh, no, you're not.
Look at that.
Okay. Oh, there we go. See? Hi.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello.
That's when you keep doing that.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, we've reached the hour of 6 o'clock. This is the May 8th meeting of the Yolo Transportation District, as we like to call ourselves now. And I'll now call the meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, I believe we have 4 of our 5 board members. Why don't you call the roll for the record?
City of Woodland,
Here.
City of Davis,
Here.
City of West Sacramento. Here. Yolo County.
I am here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And do we need to go through the Zoom information, the record, or is that fine, just written on the agenda?
I think it's fine with it written on the
All right. Anybody wants information on how to speak to us, our agenda provides appropriate information to do that, whether you're zooming in or whether you're present here tonight. We will now then move on to public comment. This is the time for people to address us for items that are not otherwise on our agenda tonight. We do ask that you respect our 3-minute speaking time. Thank you. Different groups have different amounts of time. Mr. Kandel, do you want to come speak to us tonight? Oh, this is public comment. I should speak more into the back. Well, I figured you want to come talk to us, so please come forward.
Yes, I'm coming.
All right. There is a remote handheld mic there for you. If you just push that chair out of the way and.
I'm fine here. Okay,
Can the mic pick him up there?
basically, my name is Manuel Candela. you know me and probably somebody else. For the last 2 years, probably from April 2020, the service of Yolo bus in Woodland is being really bad. From one day to the other, they discontinued 2 lines, 210 and 214. And they basically every 6 months, different persons, first Jose Perez, I think, after 2 years, another gentleman, I don't know his last name, his name is Rick. Oh no, Eric. And today I found out he's not here anymore. They say the suspension will be temporary because they want to implement the service and make it better. Nothing happened. They several times they give the word, never fulfill it, or they substitute those lines with a micro transit service. Nobody explained what it was. And they give it the time, they say like the affordable health care, you will need to do it that you will find out what is there. So we never find out nothing. In the meantime, they discontinue the line, even from the Yolo special, to cities like Zamora, Danigan, our several. So it's impossible to access to Danigan and Zamora anymore, even with the Yolo special. The last promise, no, the 2 last promise, they were in January 1st, 2023. Microtransit will be in service. Nothing happened.
I want to give you notice.
Mr.
You've got about 40 seconds more, okay?
I'll give me a few more because
Actually, you've already been over 3 minutes. So you give I'll give you a minute, okay, sir?
In February 2023, they said for sure May the 1st, a few days ago, microtransit will be in service. Nothing happened. Actually, the gentleman who provided this work, it was I think his name is Eddie. I don't remember his name. So I wonder what happened with the service of Yolo bus, who is support in the city of Woodland.
All right, sir, that's your 4 minutes. Let us give a chance to respond to you tonight, okay? All right, thank you. If you'd like to move back from the microphone, I'm going to turn it over to Autumn to explain some of our supply chain issues and other factors which were beyond our control. Autumn Bernstein, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Candela, for the comments. You're absolutely right that the microtransit service has not launched as soon as any of us had hoped. We do have an agenda item tonight to look at the service plan for the Woodland service. Some of the responsibility for the delays on our end, we have had some staffing turnover. You're absolutely right. And you remembered both Jose and Eric's names correctly. And neither of them are with us anymore. We do have a great staff who are working very hard to get this done and to launch the service as soon as possible. And just for board members' context, we did discontinue 2 of the 4 Woodland local lines when we did the Yolo Go, or comprehensive operations assessment, with the understanding that those two lines would be replaced by microtransit, but it has been a several year gap since those lines were discontinued and the microtransit is not here yet. So the service is definitely, I think the folks in Woodland have, as Mr. Candela explains, have experienced that lack of service. At this point, the major delay on the microtransit service is the vehicles. It's the supply chain issues with purchasing vehicles has been very challenging. At this point, we believe we will have 4 of the 8 vehicles that we have ordered at the end of June or early July. It was originally supposed to be January, of course, and then the other 4 vehicles, we don't even have a date for those at this point. So it is a very challenging time to try to launch it. We do not, with the fleet that we have, we simply do not have the fleet to launch this service without some new vehicles. So that is a major challenge. We do also have issues in terms of having enough drivers, but as my friend, our general manager, Michael Klein, will tell you, they are doing everything in their power to make sure that we have sufficient drivers to launch the service. At this point, our hope is August 1st. But again, that really depends on us getting delivery of at least 4 of the vehicles. And it may end up being actually a partial launch if we don't have sufficient vehicles to launch it to the full level that we would like to.
Mr. Chair, are we able to ask questions or?
Well, you know, it isn't actually agendized now, but it's on our agenda later. So in that event, I think we can discuss it at this time.
I can, Mr. Chair, I can wait till it's on our agenda and the time slotted there.
All right, why don't we do that? We'll have further discussion on this issue as we proceed with our agenda. All right, just a little more business-like anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I think I can just say we share your frustrations. You can't, love or money won't get those vehicles here any faster than the supply chain makes it possible. All right, let's move on to the consent calendar. This is items 3A through 3C. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to remove for discussion?
I'm happy to move the consent calendar as submitted.
All right, we have a motion.
Early seconds.
We heard Dr. Early seconds it, and I presume there's no public comment on the consent calendar. There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. The consent calendar is adopted. Moving on to the regular calendar, this is items 4 through 9. Item 4 is administrative reports. Discussion regarding subjects not specifically listed is limited to clarifying questions. Okay, board members, anyone board member have a report they wish to share tonight?
Autumn, I think you were going to share our subcommittee meeting, or should I? I will. Okay, perfect.
Okay, then Transdev, what's the good news? So many drivers you don't have enough buses anymore.
That would be great. We're working on it hard. We're doing individual interviews along with, we have a job fair set up for, it's on the 24th of this month, and we're got together with YoloWorks for next month to do a job fair with them. There's supposed to be like 6.
We should probably borrow that mic for you because you will not reproduce on the recording of the meeting unless you're speaking into a microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've partnered up with YoloWorks. They actually reached out to us. We reached out to them about a year ago and we didn't hear anything for a while. Unfortunately, they reached back to us. It's going to work out well. We're set up with that. And along with that, we didn't have any applications. It went stale for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden over the weekend, I had 20 applications.
Whoa.
So it's kind of nice. So we're getting through setting up individual applicants because we don't want to wait till the job fair, of course, for them to show up. But we're looking forward to getting them in. A lot of them are still setting up, interviews, but then they don't show up. But that's why we're still trying to get what we can in between, hoping for the job fair to be successful. And then I know Julie said we were looking for 68. I'm actually looking for a higher number than that so we can have more of a standby for emergencies.
68 new drivers?
No, 68 total.
Oh,
so additional 8 from where we are.
Thank you. Are we losing experienced drivers?
Not experienced drivers, no. The real turnover we've lost one experience because she moved out of the state. As far as that, the only turnover has been due to new hires. Just do training, get licensed, go somewhere else, or something comes up, but otherwise, a few of our experienced operators have moved into dispatch under road service. So we're retaining all our experienced drivers.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to the executive director's verbal report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did send out the executive director's report on Friday with lots of good photos from a bunch of events we did. So last weekend there was 5 different events I think we participated in, and so take a look at that if you want to see some good photos. So I won't touch on anything that's there. I did want to mention, you have in front of you, you have a packet, then you also have some public comment that we received. We did receive a number of public comments from people within the city of Davis, talking about the desire to bring microtransit to the city of Davis. So I just wanted to flag that. I think part of why this has come up now, you know, we've been working with Caltrans on the environmental impact report for the YoloTD project. And one of the things they did in terms of looking at their mitigation strategy for induced travel, they reached out to a bunch of jurisdictions in Yolo County and asked for ideas. And the city of Davis responded with the idea that you could launch microtransit in the city of Davis, and that would be a way to reduce VMT. So it didn't come from us, it came from the city of Davis, but Caltrans liked that idea and they ran it through their models, and it is included in the draft EIR for them to put some money, for us / them to put some of our mitigation money towards a potential pilot microtransit program. So I think the word has gotten out in the city of Davis, and that might be a catalyst for where these comments are coming from. So I just wanted to flag that. Happy to answer any questions on it. On the YoloTD project, we did have a meeting of our ad hoc committee where we kind of gave an update on some of the work that's happening in terms of our conversations with partners at the regional level, working with SACOG, the other county transportation agencies within SACOG and Caltrans about the idea of setting up a tolling authority. Those conversations are going really well, and I would say there's actually strong support for putting together some sort of a joint powers authority to manage tolling initially in Yolo County, and then bringing in the other counties as tolling comes online there. Kirk Trost, who's our consulting attorney on that, has had one-on-one conversations with each of the principals around the region now, and is preparing actually a draft framework, like a bare bones framework for what a JPA could be, and we'll be bringing that to the ad hoc committee to discuss. As well, we had got great news from SACOG last week. They have funded our tolling advanced planning project. We asked for $3 million, $2 million of which is for us and $1 million for Caltrans. So the $2 million will allow us to do all the tolling advanced planning work that's needed to apply for a tolling authority and move tolling forward. Welcome, Director Lauren. And then there's $1 million for Caltrans for design work on the project. So that's great news and will allow us to continue to move this forward. And then the last thing I will note is that there is the Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Davis is holding their 2nd annual Transit Research Symposium this Wednesday. It's an all-day event. It's free. It's open to the public. And I've been invited to lead a discussion on microtransit, a breakout session on microtransit. So I will be there, as will some of our staff, and I'm happy to share details with any members of the board or public who are interested in that. And with that, that concludes my report.
I might ask a question. First of all, I've already expressed privately to my colleagues to my left the tremendous relief we all feel that the situation in Davis involving the knife was resolved, well, hopefully with an arrest. And I sort of wondered, was there any impact for our buses while this was going on?
That's a question Mike might be able to answer. I can't say that I know.
It just seems like there were so many implications from this event. The university canceling all or doing all night classes by Zoom, for example.
Well, as far as our operators, there was concern. There was more on. They were on the lookout, so there was a lot of calls in that they had seen someone that matched the description. But as far as for a fear, I was surprised there wasn't. But we did reach out and let our operators know that if they didn't feel comfortable, to let us know.
Well, please tell your drivers they have the appreciation of this board for staying with it through that unfortunate time. Would you do that?
Will do.
Thank
you. It was very nice as far as YoloTD staff constantly checking in to see if there was any concerns and remind us to let them know if we had to adjust timing for late night routes or anything. It's nice for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item are all done. All right. Then that brings us over to the receive the 80 Managed Lanes monthly report.
Yeah, and I kind of talked about this already in my report, but I'll see if Director Early has anything she would want to add from that meeting.
I think the main thing that we talked about was just gearing up for community engagement and what that might look like for all of us. And then also, when we say community engagement, what exactly do we mean? Is it that we are wanting to go out to receive information from the community, or are we actually wanting to go out to provide education around what this is? I think what we settled on in our subcommittee is a lot of our initial community engagement is actually going to be an education campaign regarding what it is, what we're hopeful, the purpose, and even kind of what the impact will be on the community. And so that was a majority of what we actually talked about. And then we learned a lot about risk. And as potential hot topics, red flags, areas come up related to risk, our staff will educate us, and then we on the subcommittee will make recommendations regarding that and what's acceptable risk.
Are we watching the experience in Solano County and what they're doing?
So far, we have not discussed it, but that is absolutely something that I think our team could and may already be doing.
Mr. Chair, great question. We are very much talking with our counterparts there. In fact, Brian and I are scheduled to go down and meet them in person at their office next week. A key issue, I think, where the agencies need to collaborate is, I would flag two. One is that their project goes basically from the Carquinez Bridge to Vacaville to 505. Our project goes from UC Davis East. There's going to be a gap basically between Vacaville and the county line. And so they are actually, it's on their side of the line, but it impacts us very much. So, you know, they don't really have a lot of population centers to the east. Really, Dixon is the only place it's impacted, but it will be very impactful for us in terms of the bottleneck that we are working to address with this project. Will kind of shift westward, if you will. So we're talking about kind of co-collaborating to initiate a study of that section of the freeway to look at what potential options are. So that's one issue. And then the second issue that we're talking about is express bus service on the corridor and long distance bus service. You know, we have our Causeway connection and of course our Route 42. They have some bus service on their side that connects kind of from the Bay Area through Solano County. But there's not a lot of great connections across the county line. So we're talking about ways that once we have express lanes, we can leverage those to have better transit service in the corridor.
The reason I asked the question in part is because for the driving public to go through one express lane situation and a few miles later into another, they should be as similar as possible. I've driven in other parts of the state and they have all sorts of different things going on from, you know, lanes you can't move out of, and even sometimes raised things, to the electronic signage overhead. It's hard to read it all and understand what it's all about. And it's different. I think it's going to be confusing to the motoring public. So I think we should try to have some kind of consensus between the two counties as to what we're going to be doing.
And if I may, just to quickly respond, Solano is part of the MTC, what's called BAFA, the Bay Area Infrastructure Finance Authority. So they actually set the rules for how tolling will operate there. And we have also been in touch with folks at BAFA about, so they'll be establishing the toll policy for that special corridor. And of course, Solano County will be very involved, but ultimately it's the BAFA Board of Directors who gets to decide. So we have been in conversation with them and they've committed to keeping us involved as they are actually developing their policy for that stretch. And we'll do the same on our side.
I presume it's foreseeable that at some point in time, we would fill in that gap. If you look, oftentimes, for whatever reason, congestion forms between Vacaville and Davis. I don't know why, but it does. And we've all been through it.
Fewer lanes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That could have an impact.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate the report. Okay, long range calendar.
Yes, and we do have a slide on this. So just wanted to highlight a couple things. You have a number of items tonight that are preliminary for discussion only that are all coming back for approval next month. So it's going to look a bit like Groundhog's Day here in June when we're going to be approving some of the items we're talking about tonight. And then in July, we're going to be bringing you an overdue progress report on our annual goals. And then we will have the draft environmental impact report for YOLO 80 at that point. It's supposed to be released in late June. So we'll be giving you a presentation on what that EIR says. And also hopefully a kickoff on the YOLO Active Transportation Corridors project. You know, this is a project that we've been ready to get going with for about 9 months at this point, but we're waiting on FHWA to finalize the paperwork. And then in September, we hope to come back to you with our Woodland Transit Center study that you approved at last month's board meeting. A capital improvement plan. We don't have a 10-year capital improvement plan, and it's in our work plan to make that happen. So we know exactly what our outstanding capital needs are. And then a report and possible action on a salary survey to look at our compensation and make sure we understand where we are relative to other agencies, as there's been so much change in the labor environment over the last few years. And then it's also that will be my second anniversary. So my annual performance review.
2 years.
September, 2 years.
Thank you. Any questions on the long range calendar? All right, thank you for that. And now we want to receive the technical advisory committee meeting minutes. They're around here. Any questions on them? No? All right. Then the citizens advisory committee meeting minutes. Any questions or comments on them? All right, that concludes our yes.
So less questions and more just flagging that I know board member, is that what we're called here? Directors. I know Director Warren and myself need to meet to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion for our committee. And so that is a conversation that we had with Autumn, and hopefully we will be scheduling that meeting to review in the next couple of weeks. So I want to make sure that that hasn't gone off our radar.
Thank you. All right. So item 5 on our agenda is the update to the district-wide microtransit policies.
Courtney's going to do this on it.
Yep. All right. All right. Good evening. So, to provide a little bit of background before I got here, YOLO YTD staff were currently working on since October 22nd a motion to approve the promotional fare of $1 for Knights Landing for microtransit. During that time, it was always written within, but maybe not implemented, that the fare would go to $4 as the full cost for that service. Then continuing on in the beginning of January 2023, as part of our broader effort to now implement new microtransit service for the city of Woodland, as well as the need to, and we're going to be going with RideCo as our software platform that'll be kind of handling the operational aspect of this. It was required that we also update our microtransit policies. So with that, this presentation really is specifically going to go over the key elements of what have been updated. But below I've listed, just to read them out for you all, that there have been 12 sections in total that have been updated within this policy document regarding eligibility, which eliminates the residency requirement, in addition to prior that microtransit Your Ride riders had to fill out like 8 pieces of documentation that are then verified. With the new RideCo service, everyone is eligible. And essentially how it goes that they would register either through downloading the app, or for those that are not able to use the app, they can call in and then we'll record their information. That'll be uploaded within the RideCo system. So regardless of if they are app accessible or not, as long as they're able to call in and have internet connection, they're eligible to use the service. We've also changed our identification requirements, specifically meaning that with some of the different fare structures we have with microtransit, drivers have the option to ask a rider to show their ID, but it's not a requirement to use the service, in the sense that every time they book a trip, they're not going to be asked or required to show their ID. It's just to have that option. Reservation policy, which I'll kind of touch on a little bit, personal belongings, hours of service, zone maps, acceptable fares and acceptable forms, which I'll have up here in a second, rules for non-service animals, cancellations, no-shows, reimbursements, suspension of service, and then penalties for disorderly conduct. We've shrunken the previous policy document, and I think it explains in much simpler detail just the expectations that the rider should have when using our microtransit service, how to use it, and then just some rules and guidelines. And so with that, going on to the big change that we have now is that One-way fares are now, what we have proposed for this microtransit policy is $3 from what was previously $4. In addition to that, youth and senior disabled fares are $150, and then group passes can receive a 50% discount when ordering for groups between 5 to 8. In addition, with the reservation policy, now riders have the ability to book their trip up to 7 days in advance using the RideCo app or through calling in. And so touching on these big items right here, before the fares were just $3 to $4 across the board. So with that, we thought that by responding to the one-way fare, we're reducing that from 4 to 3, but also having options for youth and senior, that we were trying to respond to kind of the different needs of the different types of riders that would use the service. And so are there any questions from anyone as I proceed?
Dr. Early.
Yes, so I will reflect back to make sure I am keeping up. And so initially our fares were $2, right? All right, they were $1.
The promotional fare was $1. And I only say that because
I appreciate your emphasis. How long is that promotional fare? I mean, as long as we're calling it out.
No, right. It was supposed to be 4 years, but I believe it went on kind of for more than 2.
Yeah, 3.
3.
Okay. So our promotional fare, which lasted for 3 years, that's heck of a promotion.
Yeah.
So it went from 1 to right now, currently it's $4, right? Okay, and what right now, the YoloTD staff are proposing is that we would take it to $3 per ride.
Correct, for one way.
Okay.
But then also, depending on if they're youth, senior, disabled, it'll be $150. So different tiers would also have a further reduction for their one-way trip.
So I would just flag, less question, more commentary, that what we heard from our public around this, particularly from Knights Landing and potentially even Winter, Director Warren, you can share on whether there were any residents from there, that the jump from 1 to 4 was significant, and not all of the individuals who came and testified or gave public comment were seniors. And so I would guess that even $3 is going to still continue to feel pretty significant when you are talking about making minimum wage and needing to use this as transportation. And so I do have some ideas on this. I don't know if I should let you finish your presentation or throw those out now, Chair.
I can throw them out now.
Okay. Potentially what we could do for individuals who do not have access to fixed rides like our buses in Winters and Knights Landing is have the fare be actually $2 a ride, and that would still have it hopefully be more reasonable for those individuals who especially aren't seniors, but then would it de-incentivize folks potentially in Woodland from using fixed rides. So that is what I would propose as a discussion point.
All right, why don't we lay it on the table, as they say, for right now, and continue with the presentation, and then we'll talk about options going forward. All right.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So I think we can go to the next slide, Heather. And so kind of as I said previously, so the sections for the entire policy document, these are each section that is covered in terms of changes that have occurred. I've already kind of gone over eligibility and ID requirements and the reservation for policy. Hours of service have not currently changed at this point, but just as a reminder of how they were before is that Knights Landing from Monday through Friday operated 8 to 5. From Winters, that is from 8 to 4 p.m. On Saturday, there's no service currently for Knights Landing, and then Sunday it operates from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Winters, for Saturday services from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then on Sunday, it currently doesn't operate service. As I go and discuss item 7 regarding the Woodland service proposal that we have for microtransit, I'll include the times that are listed for the 3 microtransit options that we have. And so for now, with this policy document, the Woodland times are not included since it is a separate document in terms of what we'll be discussing. And so we just didn't want to have overlapping kind of assumption before a final decision was made.
And you're not proposing right now to change the times or days or as a policy, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you done with the presentation?
So just want to go over these last few items. So for hours of service, I covered that. The zone maps have not changed, but they're also included in the package. For the fares, I've gone over that along with the comments requested for incorporating for Winners and Knights Landing. For non-service animals, they will not be allowed on the Metro Transit service at this time. And then for cancellations and no-shows, if the rider is using the RideCo app, then that will be, they'll essentially be charged through ride credits. And so that is a way of handling the payments within the app. And that's just kind of the new feature that we have, since with Your Ride, we weren't handling online, Visa card payments for booking a fare trip. And so, let's see, for cancellation, cover that. For reimbursements, cover that with ride credits. For suspension of service, we now have, they'll receive a warning, and then after 3 warnings, there's another 3 tiers for suspension. And essentially the first suspension will be, it goes in 2-week increments. But we are not at this time having a policy in place to permanently suspend a rider. It's really for, that would lead into disorderly conduct. So if they're doing things that are detrimental to impacting drivers or other riders, we just have that written in as something that is enforceable. But in terms of the policy changes, these were some changes that were already included in the previous Your Ride that have just kind of been really streamlined for the update for the Beeline microtransit service that we get ready to launch. And so for that, I believe that is the last slide I have, Heather.
Director Lauren had a
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for your work on this. I'm very excited about RideCo, and who doesn't like a good direct policy? But my comments are more along the lines of hours of service and the cost of the service. So we went from $1, whatever we call it, to $4. So it means that people that are coming out to Winners, they don't have any other choice of transportation, and they're paying $8 to do a round trip. And by moving it to 3, it's only moving it to 6, where they can't get on a different fixed service because that's not available. And the hours are seriously reduced compared to, say, what's in the item for Woodland. That begins at 7 a.m. and goes until 11 p.m. And on Saturdays it's 10 to 6. So we're offering them a service, but it is a limited service comparatively. So to me, I think $2 is an appropriate cost for the service, and I would agree with Director Early on that. And then the other one is that when the people from Knights Landing came in, one of their items was that they really wanted Saturday service. And when I look at the calendar of the service on Saturday and Sunday, there doesn't seem to be any impetus to not provide them Saturday, but provide them Sunday. If theirs can be the same as Winners and they can have Saturdays, I think that we could be informed by ridership, maybe look at their ridership on Sundays and see if there's this, really high ridership, then maybe it's something worth saving. But if it isn't, they've asked for Saturday service, and maybe we could provide the Saturday service. And then the other comment was the one-way seniors at 65. It was quite a while back, but we talked about what are the ages, what's youth and what's senior along all different transportation in our area, in Solano County, in Placer, in SAC-RT. And it would just be nice if we somehow can make sure that youth is youth and senior is senior, and that it's the same. Like, to me, senior is 60, but we have a 62 policy. And then I think somebody else has a 65 and above policy. So anyway, as an aside, it'd be nice to update that to something that is consistent for all of the transportation in the area. But I'd like to see a discount, but if it's $2 and not $3, I would be okay with just keeping that as the amount. So I'm asking for Saturday service. And then the other one is if Winters can have till 5, just like Knights Landing, I think that would be great. So that we have the consistent days and the consistent hours instead of having that hour less for Winters. Because people, you know, if they still work and they need it. Those would be my comments.
Thank you, Director Lauren. Any other members of the board wish to speak?
Could I jump in and just real quick on a couple things? I just wanted to clarify. I think Courtney and I confirmed today that even though it said 65 was the age in this policy, that's actually a typo. It should say 62, which is the age that we have for our all other, that's how we define seniors. And then just very quickly on the Winters and Knights Landing service. Part of the reason that is different is it has to do, and Michael knows this and probably can say it more articulately than I can. It takes longer because it takes longer for the driver to get back here at the end of their shift from Winters than it does from Knights Landing, and same thing in the morning. So we have shorter service hours basically so that we don't extend the shift beyond what we're allowed to have it under our union rules. Am I getting that right, Michael?
You are. Let me add, we've actually adjusted a little bit on that. So we were doing before we had lunch breaks. So there was a time in between that there was no service. We've actually adjusted that. So there's no break in service at all from start to end. And we've actually extended out a little longer. So the service actually ends at the location, you know, in Winters to say, and we do the drive time back after. So before that was included in the travel time. And now that has been changed for several months now.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Is there a sense we talk about moving fares around, maybe what, this is best transcend, but what the average cost per ride is, or what we're talking about, like we're talking about moving $2, and means that average it costs us, we're losing money by moving fares. So I'm curious to know if there's a sense of what it costs per hour or per ride as we consider these changes or adding services on a Saturday where there isn't, what is the impact as we have our budget coming up, what we're looking at?
I have some thoughts. It sounds like Leo does too, so I'll let him start.
You know, it's a great question, and it's one I wish I had helped Courtney present as part of this. And so I was actually scribbling back of the envelope as you were talking, because we've been sort of looking at it by hours, which is how we pay for the service. Sure. But we may have more than one rider and so on. And so based on the projections for the different activities, it looks like it's around the neighborhood of $40 per rider per trip. So it's at the current levels that we're at. Now, as we expand, and one significant piece is also the platform. And so as we have more rides sharing the RideCo platform, that may go down somewhat. I haven't calculated exactly how much of it is for that. And I must say I haven't validated that figure. So that's really a back of the envelope figure. But I think that's probably the right kind of magnitude, is sort of several tens of dollars per rider.
That's consistent with industry standards. I mean, yeah. Within the industry, it's $35 to $40 is the average cost per ride for microtransit, as opposed to per fixed route, where it's more variable depending on how densely packed the bus is, right? But you're looking at kind of $8 to $25 a ride. Depending on, you know, again, how many people are on the bus. So it's a significant cost, and the fare the passenger is paying is by no means offsetting a significant amount of the cost.
I think that was, what Director Chapman was really trying to also understand, which is not only the average ride, but what would really be the difference then in the dollar change.
Yeah, so in terms of the difference to our budget, and we'll have a section on the budget, we really don't assume very much from microtransit fares. And so if you were to take it one together, it wouldn't. So I think really the way to think about fares is as a demand management tool. So if the fare is free, then you would have a lot more people wanting it. That may be a great thing, but it means that we'll need more vehicles, more drivers. So I think you may think of it as what's the fare within people's ability to pay, that sort of translates to people using it when they need it and not necessarily calling on it if they, that's a very complicated thing to evaluate. It's like you're there, it's your decision and not ours in a way. It's because it's not a technical decision. Yeah.
Thank you.
One point, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One point I do just want to make, and Director Early, you alluded to it in your comments, is that in a place where we have fixed route service, like in Woodland, we don't want microtransit to be the same cost or less expensive than the fixed route service, because then we're encouraging people to take microtransit over fixed route, when actually it's much more cost effective for us to have them take fixed route if fixed route works for their trip. So we wouldn't want a situation, for example, here in Woodland, where we would have the microtransit be less expensive than the fixed route. Fixed route is $2 a trip for local service. So, but in a place like Knights Landing or Winters, they don't have fixed route service, right? It's their only option. So I think that is an important distinction that you're making.
You want to weigh in?
Sure, I'll do. Yeah, a couple quick things. One, so I appreciate the suggestions around. First of all, I think all of us, we want to see it be successful, right? That's the whole, that's the whole point. So I think the suggestions on potentially sort of making adjustments in the fees or in terms of the fares itself, rather. I think we got to, before we sort of make those changes tonight, I think we would need to see sort of like some hard numbers run, estimates of what, how much, because I think, yes, there's some amount of income that will come in from fares themselves, but I think reality with what we're doing, and we're going to have a more, I think, in-depth discussion about this later. It has to do with the fact that we're using federal grant dollars right now to sort of pop up the agency, and we can use them faster or we can use them slower. And so based on the amount of what the fares are ultimately set at, whether it's the microtransit service or the sort of the fixed route service, I think that we have it's a policy call for us. So figure that out. I think as we have again additional discussions tonight talking about our budget and the preliminary budget. I think a couple other items. One, some questions as it relates to just the staff report. One page on page 31 of the overall packet was sort of page 3 of 12 of the proposed. Sorry, page 31. Yeah, I'm curious about the rider identification item. I mean, I think do we require IDs to be shown to ride Yolo bus, just regular Yolo bus? I think the answer is no. I mean, I don't think we required an ID to ride Yolo bus.
We don't require it,
right.
But it is, I believe we have it in our policy that riders should be able to present identification if requested.
Okay.
For at least our paratransit service.
Right.
And it is also currently the policy for our microtransit service, but I do not believe it is the policy for
the fixed route service. So, I mean, I have a question about that, just sort of why that, why, I mean, I guess it's for verification purposes that they are able to receive the reduced fare or what, I mean, I'm not for sure.
From a policy perspective, I think there's a couple different things going on. One is you want to make sure, especially for these longer trips that people have looked in advance, that you've got the right person.
Okay.
And then to the extent that there is, there could also be some, in situations we see, for example, youth ride free on our system.
Yeah.
Right. So are you 18 or are you 21? Right. There may be situations where a driver suspects abuse, for example. And so this policy gives them the latitude to do that. But it's but I also think it's intended for situations like that. But I can understand the concern about this seeming overly punitive, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, and I just asked Michael, like, is that, I mean, do drivers, are they typically asking folks for ID, or is that, 1 out of 10 occurrence? I'm just curious, like what?
On fixed route, very seldom.
Okay.
They look at the rider. If they're a student, they say they are, then they usually take it for that. Unless, there is times we had just recently, someone said, I'm a student. He says, I'm 17 years old. And they questioned because he looked like he was 30 years old.
Yeah.
That was just recent. And so they do ask if it comes up, but otherwise it's not just a regular practice.
Okay.
It's just taken as to what they're being told.
Okay, great.
On the fixed route service.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So that was just one item that I have as a sort of thought or potential issue and concern. And I appreciate the sort of discussion about that. I can understand the some aspects of it, but I still find it to be, I mean, if we don't do it on our fixed route service, or typically we don't, it's mostly just either on the paratransit rides or on the microtransit. It seems, I think consistency would be good across the board. So and I don't know, I'd be curious about what other agencies do. I mean, in terms of their, sort of asking folks for identification just to ride public transit. So, okay, so that's just a question that I have. The other item is on page 36 of the packet, it's sort of page 8 of 12 of the proposal, which is just the issues around personal belongings. We certainly know that a lot of the folks taking the Your Ride service from Knights Landing. People were coming to Woodland to do errands and do shopping. So the notion that I think, at least per the policy, that every all carry-on items must fit on your lap or to the seat. I mean, I know people that would bring the carts on to, doing shopping in Woodland, for example. So that's one issue, just in terms of the amount of size. I get you don't want to have huge amounts of, items, but that's a question I have. And the other one I'll just say is, the issue around, I get the no food and drinks as it relates to open containers, like no active eating or drinking on the bus. But I think the concept about no food and drinks at all, people do shopping. And so I think that there's got to be just a minor clarification around, no active eating or drinking is probably the way to go, as opposed to the sort of prohibition on no food or drinks that are containerized or whatever. I think there's probably an easy way to get at that. But and then the last item is just I'm actually on to the issues around the winters service. Appreciate the explanation for Director Lauren about the hours and the hours of operation because of sort of the distance to and from winters versus Knights Landing to Woodland. So I appreciate that distinction. But my question is, and when I'm on the main Yolo bus website, the 220C route was discontinued during COVID, right? Which was the sort of Davis to Winters and also ultimately to Vacaville. And it says on here, though people wishing to travel between Winters and Davis or Vacaville may be able to use YoloTD's Your Ride microtrans service. So I think, unless I'm mistaken, I want to just clarify it. We are proposing to not only allow the microtransit service in Winters to essentially be used in Winters. Is that correct? We're not still allowing it to go to Vacaville and or.
That's correct. We do still allow it to go to Vacaville and Davis.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Okay. I apologize. I guess that so I wasn't. It didn't seem clear. So anyway, I'm glad to hear that, because that definitely. I think a lot of people are probably going to want to use that utilize that service in Winters, going to the shopping or appointments, health appointments in Vacaville, or also the different service to Davis as well. So appreciate that. Thanks.
Just along those lines, when we had that fixed route that it sounds like our microtransit is subbing for, right? If I'm understanding, did we have abbreviated hours or shorter hours for that fixed ride because of, again, just distance?
Yeah, I think the thought was for both for Winters that and I rode the 220C for a while when I lived in Winters for a minute. It was only like every 2 hours, it was only a handful of runs, and the thought was, per day, it was like 5 trips per day or something. And the thought was, well, for having one driver that's just running back and forth on this very limited schedule, you could just have the same driver with a smaller vehicle just available to have trips on demand. And it's more or less the same cost, because it's the driver that is really the biggest portion of the cost. And so I think the thought was that it just creates more flexibility to use those resources more efficiently. And similarly for Knights Landing, I think we had service like not even every day to Knights Landing, or maybe it was 1 trip a day. I don't know, it's before my time.
Mine as well.
And that cost was the same as our normal. So was it $2 a ride or?
Right. So, well, let's see. Those would have been, I'm not sure. I think would have been our intercity fare, which is at $225.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just one quick clarification. I apologize. I missed the on the map, the Winters map. It does clearly state that it could go to city limits in Davis or Vacaville. So my apologies there, but so I'm glad to see that that's still the case.
We should probably decide that. Yeah.
And then just following up on Director Ferrick's, on the policies, I just want to make sure I'm reading this right, because I could be reading it wrong. Just because it's passengers must have closed their toe shoes and be fully clothed. I think, no, but I think it's closed-toed shoes is what you're going for there, right?
Oh, yeah.
No. I'm actually, so do we have that same policy on our fixed rides as well? Just because I'm a California girl, right, and once it hits 110, I'm wearing flip-flops. I thought it was unusual, but I wanted to make sure I was understanding.
I think when we were coming up with the policies, we were trying to really emphasize kind of cleanliness. So that might be how the language is written in terms of like just closed-toed shoes, no food or drink, and just kind of thinking of how this will be a shared service that will be probably used throughout the day and have high use, and just having a standard way of people, regardless of the trip that they may be going to, and just all kind of having to abide by things that would limit the spills or potential for cleanup.
Yeah.
spills totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I just, I get nervous when you start to police people's clothing. So what's our policy on our fixed rides as far as clothing and attire?
It's a good question and a great point, and I don't know the answer. So maybe Michael does. Michael, we're just calling on you a lot for all these operational questions.
No, actually on the fixed route side, there's no policy, say, you know, usually you have to have some kind of shoe, so whether it's a flip flop, sandals, that's allowed. And it's fully clothed. And other than that, it's just, there's not much more than.
That totally makes sense.
You know, that's how it is.
How you define fully clothed these days is subjective.
Well,
Again, I'm not-
California wise, what's expected as, you know, clothes.
Are we talking Zoom or in real?
Where possible, I think what we're hearing is where possible, it would be great actually just to match up the policies with the fixed rides versus adding to our policies here for microtransit.
Okay, I'm gonna bring it back to the chair, if you all don't mind. I enjoy the colloquy here. It just helps to bring home to us the many complications involved in just about anything we do here. And I appreciate it. I'd just like to say that, you know, I've always believed you crawl before you walk and you walk before you run. And we've really made some pretty major changes in the operation of the district in the last few years. We've actually had taken away routes that people depended upon, small numbers, and it was an economic decision in favor of putting resources into routes that had the potential for major growth, for instance, 42. Those are economic decisions. And I really believe in the role of economics in making decisions. And I'm a little concerned about throwing out numbers here, whether it's $4 or $2, it could be $2.75, who knows? But I think we would probably need, I like scenarios. I like to know the implications of decisions. So I think probably staff, if you wouldn't mind playing with those numbers a little bit. I also feel sympathy for minimum wage people. You know, we heard from the woman who works at Burger King, and, you know, I mean, really, $8 for a round trip or even $6 for a round trip is a big hit for her. That's half an hour of her work under the new minimum. So, you know, I would be willing to issue a card to people who self-identify as, you know, below the poverty line or some such thing, and maybe deal with special cases. But I frankly feel we should be getting the money we can from those who are able, simply because we're subsidizing every one of these to the tune of 90% if it's at $4 and even more if it's at $3, at least on the basis of $40 per ride. So when I talk about walking, crawling before we walk, I know everybody wants to start. I like the idea of starting earlier. I like the idea of work going later. I like the idea of Saturday, but there's cost implications to all those decisions. And my inclination, it's easier to expand service than to retract service. So I would like to see it begin with a little restraint. And as we go into this, and at the city of Woodland, we don't even understand why we're doing fixed route and point to point. But auto assures me there's good reasons for it. And I would like to learn more about it as we go along. I mean, I've always been thinking at some point we would let fixed route go. I know you have the end of West Sacramento, so there must be a reason for keeping it as well as your very successful via service. So anyway, I feel like there's a lot going on here and many variables, and we should be, let's just say, cautious as we approach all of this, make the best decisions we can. And I'd love to see us expanding to these other options, perhaps as we get a little experience under our belt. You know, anyway, that's basically my input. The one other thing, you know, there isn't one of us at this table that aren't using Uber, and it's so simple. I mean, I get in, you know, I just call up on my phone, I get in the thing. I don't have to do anything. It prompts me for the tip. You know, it does everything. I don't know that we're a public agency. We're not the same as a private operator, but I think we should aspire to be that easy to use. I do not understand why you can't use your MasterCard or your Visa, you know, for public transit, just like anything else. Basically, the rest of the world runs on it. I was actually able to use my Visa to get on a train in Vancouver, Canada, public train. And flash at the beginning, flashes at the end, and it actually build the amount of money that the ride costs. So I always favor simplicity. And if you have people going through a lot of hoops, I think that reduces the willingness to use it. It certainly does for me.
Sure. I think the only downside, especially to the communities that we are trying to serve, is unfortunately not all of them actually have access to a Visa, MasterCard, some even a bank account. So that would be the only trouble there.
I agree. We can't avoid the necessity of taking cash, but that has all kinds of complications for operations. I'm not saying no, but I would like it. If you want to expand it, you know, a lot of successful transit services appeal to everybody. If you go to Metro in Washington, everybody's on the Metro. And same as with the New York subway. So I would like to think that our public transit is for every member of the public, from those with means to those with nothing. One more comment from Director Law.
I just had one other comment to clear up, and I really appreciate the robustness of the discussion. So I took a little poll of people that ride the Yolo bus winners, and one of them is Campesina Mary. She takes a bus. I think she pays $2.25 from Sacramento, and she goes to Davis and then gets on the bus to Winners, and then she works in one of the farms. You know, she's a farm worker. So she pays right now the $2.25 and then $4 and then $4 and then $2.25 to get back home. But I was trying to just kind of dial down on what in the future we're not going to do that. So she pays the $2.25. Does she get a transfer then? And then she doesn't have. Then she pays what? What's the cap? I want a cap, and I want to be able to explain it to her. If I can't do it in Spanish, I will want somebody else to be able to. So, you know, I really just need to understand it.
Currently we have the transfer fare set up so that if you are transferring from your ride, then your transfer is free.
Okay.
If you're transferring from fixed route to your ride, then you would pay the difference in cost depending on the cost of your fare for using fixed. At this time now, that is definitely subject to change because we're looking at different fare structures that you both proposed and recommended. And so we'll have to see how that affects the current cost of our fares with the transfers for using Beeline service.
Just to clarify, when you say current, you mean the current proposal?
I mean the current
what we
proposed
currently do. Right. Currently, there's no free transfers.
There's
Correct.
no free transfer,
no
but there would be
but there
a
would
transfer available in the future. I might have just used 1,000 extra words on that. But can we make sure that there's a transferability in place for somebody like that that's low income and 60 years old and is still working as a campesina? You know, she's working because she has to.
Yeah, so under what we've proposed tonight, she would pay $2.25 to ride the 42. It's $2.25, right? Not $2.50. It is $2.25. To get to Davis, she would get on the micro transit. It would be free. No, I apologize. It would be, you would have to pay the difference. So she would pay 75 cents because she'd be paying the difference between the fixed route fare and the micro transit fare, which would be 75 cents. Because it's if we keep it at $3 as proposed. So if she's already paid her $2.25, she would pay 75 cents to board micro transit and get the rest of the Winners. And on the way back, she'd pay her $3 for the micro transit, and then it would be free when she gets on the 42. So in other words, she's only paying $3 max for the trip when you combine micro transit and fixed route.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, can I ask one thing?
Yeah.
So this is something we've definitely thought about in terms of the financial hardship, just with everything that's going on, the cost of living, and thinking about how that relates to micro transit service and kind of the expectations. And just so kind of I'm getting a clear sense of like how the board is feeling, is that there needs to be kind of some equity pricing associated with certain groups beyond just kind of the senior fares that we have listed in youth. Am I kind of understanding kind of based on your comments with certain implications that people may be having? Or is it more focused on the regional areas, meaning Knights Landing and Winners, setting those fares, since those are areas where more people may experience financial hardship within our service area and Woodland to an extent too. And
B.
again, and sorry, go ahead.
Pick door number B. It's,
Gotcha.
it's
I
a
just heard
Knights
two
Landing and Esparto, you know, it's rural, so you have all that rural need, and then they don't have the fixed route. And then the people that are going in and out are often also low income. So if there's a, like $2 and it's that for everyone and they don't have to prove something, I think that they would feel, you know, that would be the best way to address it.
For me, it's regional. There are no fixed routes there. And so just, there's no option. And so it's unfortunate, but your option for fixed route in Woodland would be $2, $2.25. That's not even an option in those areas. And so that's the equity that I'm personally looking at, is you don't even have access to that.
Quick question, staff, are we going to be revisiting this before its final adoption?
So our proposal, based on the feedback we got from the board last month, was to actually bring this to you as an action item. However, you know, certainly, of course, we can continue that if that's your direction. But we did give you the option to approve this tonight, based on what we heard from you last night of wanting to move this forward more quickly than the Woodland fixed route service plan, or sorry, the Woodland microtransit service plan.
It feels like you've probably heard a lot of, I mean, there's been a lot of feedback that probably could be a little bit more fleshing out or worked on. I just wanted one quick clarification, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, just on the, when I'm now on Yolo Bus's main website under the passenger rules sort of section, like that's the language I think we probably need to use for the, you know, the microtransit as well. I mean, including, you know, talking about, you know, eating and drinking and such, right? Keep food and drinks on open and sealed containers while on the bus, right? Wear appropriate clothing and footwear while on the bus. That's what we already have as our rules on fixed route services. So, I mean, it would seem like the consistency across the microtrans is probably, the paratransit is probably worth it too, yeah.
Sure, Sally.
I just saw that for the first time, so.
Our council Wagner, which is curious.
One, I just want to make sure we also had the opportunity for public comment for the item. I'm not sure we offered that.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we leave this item, would any member of the public wish to weigh in? Thank you. And
yeah, just
friend here's been very patient.
Just a point of clarification. So, Ms. Williams, you asked about what the kind of direction that we were thinking here this evening. Can you clarify what you were saying, that there's only exemptions or discounts in certain areas?
Well, it sounded like I was hearing a request for both applying a regional aspect to how fares are structured, in addition to maybe a socioeconomic aspect that goes beyond just saying that we have our fare set at one price for general fare, and then if you're a senior or youth, it's here, and then group discount. It sounds like and I just want to kind of say that back just so I'm hearing correctly what it sounds like, which is to apply for Winners and Knights Landing a more regional, lower cost fare for microtransit, and then also looking at how we can get more numbers for you guys to play with in terms of coming up with the proposed fare, whether it's $2 or $3, but more saying how much of a subsidy of, you know, knowing it costs $40 a trip and saying, well, this is why we go with 3 as opposed to 4. And so I was kind of repeating that back because I know we discussed a lot today, and
that's why I wanted to clarify. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we've given our staff a lot of work. Do you feel we have enough guidance at this point?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we'll work on this and plan on bringing something back to you at the next meeting.
Pardon me?
It's really important.
I wasn't suggesting it wasn't, but you know, I mean, the idea is we could have passed it tonight, but if we're not close to it, it looks to me there's several things that need to be fleshed out, right?
Yeah, okay.
All right. I think that concludes item 5. This brings us to item 6, which is our preliminary 23-24 budget. And you want to introduce the subject on.
I will just remind the board that, this is the preliminary budget discussion. We want to hear, this will be in the last item. We want to hear your feedback, and then we will be bringing this back to you for approval in June.
Okay, so I take it from here.
That's the setup for you.
Yeah, I guess so. It's the culmination, or the beginning of the culmination of my year. It's exciting. So I just want to remind the board about the timeline. So back on April 10th, we had a discussion with with the technical advisory committee on the budget, particularly to introduce the Transportation Development Act fund budget proposal. And May 1st, the full draft was shared with the Technical Advisory Committee and then with the Citizens Advisory Committee on May 2nd. And so today is our board discussion on the draft. By May 30, we'd like to get, I mean, if you have comments beyond those tonight, we would really like to get them in hand by May 30 because we have to come back to you on June 12th in the next board meeting. At that point, we would hope that we're ready to have you approve the budget. You have the option of approving it as a preliminary budget if you wanted to continue discussing, but we need to have some budget in place by July 1st to have sort of the legal authority to spend. But you have the option of approving it as preliminary or final in June. So that's our timing. I guess you could even do a special meeting after June 12th, but we like to avoid that unless it's necessary. So moving on to the next slide. So I'm just going to go over really a few of the highlights, a very quick presentation, and then we can get into comments. I don't want to go into all the tables, but the total operating budget proposed here is 19.6 million. That's up about 10% from the current fiscal year. And then aside from the operating budget, there's about 2.6 million in proposed new capital project and planning appropriations. Those are the projects that might be multi-year, that you'd be approving new funding in this budget. In addition to, we estimate about 3.9 million is continuing, hasn't been spent yet from prior years. And that's presented in one of the budget tables. In terms of the Transportation Development Act funding that comes through our local jurisdictions, there's about 2.9 million in transit assistance funds. That's really specifically only for transit. And then 6.2 million in local transportation funds, which are may be used for other local roads needs if not needed for transit. And the combined is about 9 million in this budget for the district, which if approved in that split would leave about 9.2 million, slightly more, still retained by jurisdictions in this year's budget. And that's about a 3% increase for the local jurisdictions over the current fiscal year. And the way that we came up with those numbers was really to try to set it so that each jurisdiction's growth or decline would be shared between the district and that jurisdiction and the local transportation fund money. The state transit assistance would all be supporting this budget, but the LTF change would be based on how SACOG has SACOG's own formulas for determining the growth of it. And there's a specific table we can talk to if there's questions in the budget. So moving to the next slide. So here's some of the highlights in the budget. There's improved transit service proposed in the budget, which includes increasing frequency on Route 42A and B to 30 minutes all day long. And that's about a 25% service increase over our current levels. It restores the express service from South Davis to downtown Sacramento and would restore evening service in West Sacramento. That's a major portion of why the budget is increasing this year over last year, other than standard sort of cost of living increase. There's the Beeline microtransit service that we'll be talking about more, and we've talked about a lot already. So supporting the launch of Woodland microtransit service. That was actually in the current year budget for 6 months, as we've talked about. We're very sorry not to have been able to start it this year, but we're budgeting it for next year. And then just only one change in the staffing, and that's not an increase in FTE, but there's just an internal restructuring of splitting a deputy director position that was previously transit and planning into two separate director of planning and director of transit operations. And that's offset by the reduction of one planner position in order to have no net increase in the operating budget FTEs. Now in June, we may come back to you with as Autumn mentioned, a major grant that we received from SACOG for $2 million. And there wasn't time yet to include it in this budget as part of the budget. If we include it as part of, it could be approved by you separately and not part of the budget, but if we fold it in here, we do expect to have 2 grant funded positions. So if we come back, we might show 2 additional positions that would be specifically funded by that grant, but that's not included yet in this version of the budget. So going to the next slide. So in the capital and planning budget items, we have continuation and more funding going into the I-80 Express Lane toll authority planning, and that is grant funded. The active transportation corridors, the transition to a zero emission fleet, some more funding going to that. And that's really applying some of the LCTOP funds towards building up our match for future bus purchases for the zero emission fleet. And also we are in this planning budget, we're planning to replace 2 of our CNG buses because our buses are getting so old that in order to maintain reliable buses while we are transitioning to zero emission, we still need to have at least these 2 just to make sure we're keeping all our current or the current number of buses online while we do that transition, because we can't immediately ramp up the zero emission buses that fast. And so we consider that part of the transition is just to have 2 new buses that will keep going as we're going through the transition. And then some additional funds for the Downtown Woodland Transit Center plan. It's the other project that is part of that capital planning budget. And so moving on to the next. So there'll also, when we come back in June, there'll be a resolution on the budget, and this is what the resolution would approve. It would approve the budget, and you can either approve it as preliminary or as final. It authorizes a 7.67% cost of living adjustment. That's the existing formula that the board approved a couple of years ago when the personnel handbook was modified, and it's based on the actual cost of living change reported by the state over from 1 April to the next date. So it's just applying that formula. It authorizes the deposit as the budget increases. We keep our general reserve at a 25% level, so it authorizes the necessary deposit to the reserve to follow that policy. It would authorize the use of our local transportation funds. We may be adjusting that a little when we come back in June. It's really more around, there's some of the funds that are available for capital, but they're supposed to be a board resolution. And so it's really just a portion of those funds that may be applied towards capital expenditures that we need to approve in the budget resolution. And then this is unchanged from last year, but just highlighting that in terms of the budget control, it does authorize the executive director to move funds around in the approved budget, provided that the funds do not exceed the amounts authorized by the board. And it sets, but meanwhile, sets a calendar for presenting budget status reports as we did today to make sure the board is aware if there are any problems throughout the year, and that staff would be preparing a plan to address any problems if they were to occur during the year with the budget. And so that's a set calendar. A new thing in this year's budget, and this is really good, something we've been intending to do for quite a while, and it was reinforced at our technical advisory committee, the need for it. Especially since we're increasing service midway through the year, it's very important to show what that means on an annualized basis, and also the fact that we're using some one-time or sort of diminishing funding in this budget. So this is in particular to look at the table 3 in the budget. This shows that there's about a 1.4 million cost in the next year, in 24-25, annualizing the 6 months of increased service. And then we want to look at what other funding sources in this budget would be not available in future years. By the way, I just want to say in that table, there's a lot of caveats. For simplicity purposes, it all assumes 2023 dollars. It doesn't try to forecast inflation. It just treats it in constant dollars. And so it doesn't have all the nuance of a forecast that tries to look at individual inflation levels and revenues or expenditures.
So just to clarify, because I don't think you actually said the words, this is a 5-year financial forecast.
Yeah.
And the table is on page 65 of your packet.
Yes, that's good. So, so you'll see this shows sort of the major pieces of our budget and the fact that we need to solve for the increased cost of annualizing the service. And then it recognizes that we have some competitive grant funding in our current budget that will be going away, about 0.7 million. And we're also drawing down the rest of our special sort of stimulus funding during COVID, both the ARPA and the CARES Act funding. We've been advised by SACOG and the feds that they'd like us to draw down our ARPA funding first. And so this proposes using that all up next year, and basically drawing down the rest of our CARES Act funding in the next 2 years. And so then as that goes away, that means that what we're solving for is you can see it's about a $6.3 million, again, in 2023 dollars, in 2025, 26 and forward. And so what this table does is it shows some proposed ways of addressing that shortfall in the future. In this scenario, we do expect to continue to have the formula funds, and we're anticipating that they will be at a level where we can backfill. These are federal formula funds for operations that give us 50% funding for most of our operations. Some of it is actually 80% for the preventive maintenance part, but that would sort of backfill for half of the loss of the ARPA and the CARES Act. We just go back to funding operations with the 50% money. We would continue to apply for competitive grants, and we would hope to get at least the level that we're operating with now of the CMAQ grants. And then there's a question as to what's the rest of it. Well, we do still have some unrestricted funds that we've built up over the past years for various reasons, where we haven't been able to spend all of the budget that's been approved. And we drew down some of those in COVID, but we still have over 8 million of those funds. And so we want to show a measured use of those funds, sort of at a higher level and then ramping down, because they won't be with us forever. And then we would need other strategies to make up the rest of the gap. So this is just one scenario among many one could create. But if we were to use up our unrestricted fund balance, or at least use up, say, about over about 5.5 million of it, with a declining amount, then the other source of funds that are sort of under your control, in a sense, is the local transportation fund that's currently retained by jurisdictions. So this board can approve an increasing use of those funds. There could be other funding strategies as well, which are mentioned in the narrative. But they include some things such as already transit agencies are lobbying the state for additional transit funding. And they're in much dire straits than we are. So they're sort of doing the heavy lifting for us, the BARTs and the MUNIs and the Los Angeles. So it's possible we may get improved state funding formulas that could improve this. And then there are other potential funding sources such as fares and in the future, once a tolling authority is created, we don't know how many years away that might be, those tolls. And another hypothetical is one could do local funding measures for transit. But the one that's most easily available to this board is the remaining local transportation fund. So we want to go down. And so that is a very high level view of highlights, and then open to any questions and discussion.
I think that was very clear. I truly appreciate it. I did hear a comment today at SACOG, someone saying that public transit is going to be going off a funding cliff. As you look at this, of course, with the end of the COVID, was actually bonus funding because it helped us a lot. And there's no relief in sight at the moment.
So one thing I want to, you're right that for many other agencies, they have already hit that cliff, or they're spending that money now, and whereas we are in better financial shape. We're also in better financial shape because we don't use all of our LTF for transit. Most of those other places do. They use 100% of it. Because we don't, we have that flexibility that we could draw it down if needed be, but that would also obviously have implications for the streets and roads budgets of the local jurisdictions here in Yolo County. So it's not easy in that sense. But Leo's absolutely right that there is a very big push right now in the current budget discussions to try to have the state increase the amount of money that goes into STA. And we would probably be a beneficiary of that, even though we're not personally working on that. And Leo touched on the transportation sales tax manager. We do have the authority under our authorizing legislation to put before the voters a transportation sales tax manager, not just for transit, but for all of the transportation needs in the county. And that revenue, would be put together with an expenditure plan, et cetera. I see that as not as a very possible option for this agency, not just to improve or not just to assist with stabilizing transit, but also to help us address all of our transportation needs. Counties that are so-called self-help counties that do have a transportation sales tax measure are much more competitive for state and federal dollars, most of which do require or at least encourage a local match. in order to bring in grants for all sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of reasons that this body may want to consider down the road a local transportation measure, not just because, you know, we are kind of, I would call ours is we have a, not necessarily a fiscal cliff, but definitely a long downhill over the next 5 years. So anyway, and I say that only to provide a little bit more context on why I don't think that is such a radical solution, but rather one that actually might solve a lot of different problems in this county.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I have several questions, and so I'll rattle them off. So I can stay some time for other folks too. So I'm new to this board, and what would be helpful for me to understand if we are talking about approving a COLA is to have a better idea over the past 2 years what salary increases have been done for the staff and what the percent has been, both range and average, just to help level set what that looks like for today. And I say that only because, yes, acknowledging and seeing inflation, but also putting it into the context, what increases have we been doing over the years, right? So have we been keeping that would be helpful. I do want to make sure that at least, and this is more comment than anything, that the ARPA dollars, the way that it was presented, it sounds like hey, you know, we're going to draw these down. If we don't use them, they will be taken away from us. I want to be like super clear about that. It's not like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we use these first? It's if we don't, any day now, someone's going to come and take them away. So I just think that's really, really important that we highlight that. The increased use of the 5307 formula funds, I see that for 24-25, we say 500,000 and then it slowly increases. I'm just curious where these funds where have they been used previously and why they're not being used now? Again, and there's just one more question. I'm assuming you're writing these down. The use of the unrestricted fund balance carried forward from prior years. Are these reserve funds or is this something else?
So I guess starting from the last one first, since it's easiest in mind. The unrestricted funds from prior years is, we haven't, they are unrestricted in the sense that they are not grant funds or that we're required to report on. They are basically what's left in our bank account from the local transportation funds that we've received, from the fares that we've received, and the Cash Creek funds that we've received. And so we haven't actually identified a first, second, third that we're using in our budget. So it's really all of those funds that are unrestricted once they come to us. For simplicity's sake, one could think of it as local transportation funds we've taken from prior years that we built up, which we can now use to smooth the need to take more of them in future years, perhaps. And just say that we've spent the other things first. But actually, no one has created a hierarchy of which funds are spent 1, 2, 3 in the course of the budget.
And just to clarify again, my exact question was, are these reserves? So it sounds like the answer would be no, they're not reserves.
They're just, yeah, discretionary.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
In terms of the 5307 funds, we have not currently used all of them. We budget for all the 5307 funds we can draw down with our budgeted expenditures. So fully, after we spend 100% funds, fully half of our operational funds are covered by either 5307 for the urban areas, or we do use up our 5311 funds, which are the rural areas. But we make sure we claim all that we can, but we actually have more allocated to us from prior years than we have spent so far to date. And that's why I think there's room to actually increase it as our budget increases. It is a thing, if we reduced our CARES Act, so next year we could claim a lot more of it. If we weren't claiming our 100% funds, we could be claiming 5307 funds.
As I understand 5307 funds, they're given to a community that's over 50,000 in population. Is that correct?
They are formula funds, but based on population, but you need to have a local match to use them. And so part of the reason that we don't use them all, or that we have the ability to access more of them, is because we have been using the recovery funds, which don't require a local match. But the STA funding, or the Transportation Development Fund, is our local match. So we can only draw down as many 5307 funds for operations as we have local match for. So there's just some of that money we never spend.
And you're aware that West Sacramento 5307 funds go for the VIA service.
Well, I'm trying to, I am aware that the funds that folks would like to be used here go to our VIA services. I was trying to distinguish between the LTF and the 5307, which are on two different lines, but it sounds like are interrelated.
Well, then, yeah, the 5307 is the federal funds and the LTF is state funds.
Okay.
Yeah, but we need the LTF in order to get the 5307.
Hence why I said, it sounds like they're interrelated, but they're on two separate lines on this, so I'm just.
Yeah,
I mean, we can use, just to be, clarify a little, we can use any non-federal funds as match. And the LTF is our primary, but we do also have fairs again, and
so again, just to make sure I'm keeping up, and then I'll stop. LTF are the funds that right now each of our cities use for various things. It sounds like some use for roads and other things. To your point, Chair, West Sacramento uses it for our microtransit, which is VIA that we operate. You would need those funds or something like it in order to match for your 5307 to actually see the increases from going to 500 to 2.1 million and ongoing at 2.1 million. Did I follow your budget correctly?
Yes.
I mean, yes, I mean, the current level of 5307 is actually about 2 million. That's if you look up above that gap, this is saying the additional that we would do to help support the gap. So it'd be rising from our current $2 million. And
either way, your gap would be 2 million if for whatever reason you don't actually get a yes vote on those LTFs being pulled from the cities.
Or some other source.
Okay.
You know, Dante, this is a bit of a sore subject. West Sacramento has made its own independent decision what to do with it. It didn't come through this board. City of Davis has given theirs to Unitrans unilaterally. It didn't come through this board. So basically that $2 million is basically mostly the 5307 allocation, if I'm not mistaken. And we're looking forward to using it for the multimodal service,
yeah.
And perhaps microtransit other things, but we sort of feel like we should have a right to kind of direct money that came in respect of our meeting the standard for allocation of money, because our sister jurisdictions have done the same. So
I don't know that that's, we have to talk carefully about this. Yeah, but I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. Is that correct? I mean.
So I heard a couple of different things, but I'm not sure. I may have misheard. West Sacramento doesn't use any 5307 funds. They are not eligible for the only ER. So they use LTF to pay for their VIA service.
Apologize for my misstating.
It's okay. Like you said, you have some sore feelings, so I get it.
As you know, you're going to hit 50,000. Aren't you already there?
50.
Have you hit 50,000 population yet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've been at 57,000 for a while.
Can they expect this allocation then?
I think so. The 5307 allocation comes to us for Woodland, Davis, and West Sacramento. Davis is a little bit different because of Unitrans, but yes.
We actually get a portion of the Sacramento urban UZA, urban zone.
That's right. That's right. No, you're right. West Sacramento is part of the larger Sacramento UZA.
And so there's a SACOG process for dividing up the Sacramento UZA, or there's sort of a negotiation. And so we get about 1 million of the Sacramento UZA 5307 right now, as well as the Woodland 5307. And it's an interesting thing. With Davis gets its own UZA, and through a long-standing agreement, we get 150,000 of the Davis UZA as sort of a flat amount, which is supposed to be for our service.
I don't want to see any dispute over this. Facts are going to make the decision for us, but I just wanted to be aware that there is a feeling in my community that we haven't yet made a powerful appointment, so to speak, as we see our sister city did, at least in Davis. I thought it was with West Sacramento as well. So why don't we just set that aside for now? Yeah. Additional questions? You had a bunch of questions. Did you all?
No, you answered all of them except for the And I know, because I can tell on your face that you know.
No, actually, no, I'm trying to think like the COLA. Yeah, I think when I was taking down I mean, what, the COLA in the current year, again, the current year COLA was the first one done on that formula. So it was.
And what I actually specifically asked was, what have been the salary increases over the past 2 years? Both the range and the average salary increases, just to be able to put into context what would be reasonable this year, right? Like I don't take, similar to how you do projections and you base them on historical information. I think it's important to put it into context.
Sure, and the average salary is sort of a funny thing because we have, we've had new people. I mean, it's funny, we have a different suite of people and positions. So I guess we could present it as it is, but I'll have to see what.
I would assume that there's been not only an increase, not only in your current salary, but also I would think the range as well, because I'm seeing that there's a request here to increase the range as well.
Well, that's what the form, in terms of what the formula does, according to the handbook, there's been 2 significant increases. One was with this year's budget using the formula. And so that was, again, based on the COLA for the prior year, it was 4%. And then prior to that, there was, and Autumn would know more of the history, there's a long period of time where there have been basically no.
Do you want me to jump in? Yeah.
You want to?
Okay.
Yeah.
So in December of 2021, which is about 3 months after I came on board, the board both adopted new personnel policies that established this new framework for how salary adjustments were done, which is a cost of living increase at the discretion of the board based on this kind of formula that's April to April. And then also merit-based increases based on annual performance review. So that was all approved in December 2021 to go forward. So we've done 1 round of that. And so it was, I think, like Leo said, about 4%. And then the performance reviews happened also last summer. And based on that, I would say the overwhelming majority of staff got that 4% increase. So those happened last year. At the same time that the board took that action in December 2021, they also implemented a compensation study, the first one that had been done, and I don't know how long, a very long time. And that found that most of our staff were actually, not only, they were below the bottom of the range of comparable positions in the Sacramento region. And so the board authorized about $100,000 to basically bring everybody to at least the bottom of the range for those who were not already. Some people were already above the bottom of the range. And so that brought all of the long-term staff up to the bottom of the range. And that averaged about 7%, I want to say. Now, we've had a fair amount of turnover since that time. And we have new staff that have come in the last year, or really in the last 2 years since that time, that because it's a much tighter, more competitive labor market, folks came in more at the middle of the range, right? In order to fill positions, right? We were not able to get anybody in here at that level. So, so those increases that you're talking about, or that you asked about, those are the increases that have applied to everybody who's been here in the last 2 years. And then for new staff, the new staff that have been here in the last year have not seen any salary increases. I hope that answers your question.
Director Chapman has some questions.
No, I'm just curious, like, I don't know. I mean, is this something historically, has this board, this board set up any kind of a subcommittee or some kind of a group to, 7.67, obviously it's a pretty big jump. And I think anyone in jurisdictions who are dealing with any sort of negotiations in the world that we're living in right now are experiencing very similar conversations back home. I just don't know if that needs to be drawn out and discussed here this evening around what we're trying to paint, to pigeonhole in terms of numbers. So how do we, in the bylaws, it says, right, if I read them correctly, that it's not set at that April to April number, that the board has the ability to go back and look. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that's something that we could look at and look at salaries, look at the COLA and make a suggestion coming back if that's something that we would be interested in doing. Unless people think that the 7.67 number is where we want to move forward. So
I will say, I think when the board approved that policy, it was certainly before inflation had done what it has done.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, I think we were looking at interest rates that are much more typical with historical trends. I think when the board approved that policy. So certainly can understand the desire to kind of take a closer look at that, given what's been happening in the economy in the last 18 months.
Yeah. I think that was a very appropriate comment, and I appreciate your making it, Josh. The action we're asked to consider tonight is to consider adoption of the budget after public hearing at the next scheduled board meeting on June 12th, 2023. I think we've identified a few things that we wanted clarification. We've gotten some of that clarification. There may be more that could be forthcoming. So perhaps, yes.
I like Director Chapman's suggestion on either a subcommittee or something. I am used to these conversations actually happening either in closed session or at an executive level. And so the idea that maybe a subcommittee could have these discussions, work more closely with staff to come up with something that would be in line and more reasonable would be helpful.
I think that's an outstanding suggestion. Your experience, you're suggesting that we adopt his idea. You know, frankly, we've never put a percentage like that out in a public discussion before negotiations. So I think we want to do that. Do you have a thought?
I just wanted to put, I think something else that might be relevant for the board. As mentioned in the forward calendar, we are commissioning a compensation study. And so we were hoping to have that available by September, which would document and put before the board a comparison to other jurisdictions and allow for making sure that our staff are placed in appropriate. And we were hoping that the board, so in terms of setting staff expectations, like there really is a range of issues here. It is important, particularly for staff who are longer term and were placed in the bottom of a range after a compensation study, even though they had been here for some time. There was a sense of there was something that was, so there really are different circumstances. I think the availability of a new compensation study will be really helpful in this process. And if there were the chance that the compensation recommended by that study can be retroactive to July 1st, even if it occurs afterwards. That might be something.
Negotiations, all of that's possible in negotiations. Right. I really think that's should be a bargaining table and not a forward table. Right.
And to be clear, we don't have a bargaining table.
Right. Yeah. I mean, almost, yeah.
No, I mean, not an official.
On the driver's side, yes, with our operator, but none of the staff.
Yeah, I understand that. You know, my feeling is all you really need to do is present us the number of the cost of compensation, and that's our budget basically, and we can work it out.
Just to be clear, so we had a compensation study done in 2021, and now we're doing another compensation study in 2023. I just want to make sure.
Good question. So just for context, that was done internally by the staff, by our former director of finance before I started. And
I'll even cut through the changes more. I'm not sure it was reliable.
Thank you. That's helpful. I'm just like, why? But
it was a windshield study.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
There's a lot of questions about it.
I'm gonna turn my mic on.
But very good question. I had, Mr. Chair, I have one quick comment with regard to the whole budget item. And I appreciated Director Early's comments earlier about the issues around ARP dollars, especially. I'm sure I don't know what the deadlines are vis-a-vis the CARES Act dollars. I'm sure it's similar, but certainly with ARP, I mean, yes, like let's not hoard them, let's use them. That's what they're for certainly, but also they are, need to be encumbered by the December 31st, 2024, and then spent by 2026. So we do have a bit of time. I mean, it's not like keep saving them, but encumbering them over the course of the next basically a year and a half to up to, you know, almost 2 full calendar years, like is, you know, gives a little bit of breathing room, thankfully. So, but I also understand, and I'm not sure what the CARES Act deadlines are, but clearly, you know, thankfully there's a little bit of buffer in there. But again, you know, not maybe we want to be sure to use those dollars first, though, as opposed to just wait through the 2026 frame to spend them all. So.
Thanks, Bob. When I spoke with our FDA contact last week, yes, you're right. You're right about the ARPA funds. They don't actually have to be spent right away next year, but the CARES Act, they haven't actually established a drop dead date for using them yet. They always could in the future, right. But it surprised me. I kept saying, when do we have to spend these by? And at least according to our contact with the FDA, I said, well, we haven't really established a final. Interesting.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
And colleagues, it's been a robust discussion. Do you have enough questions? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think once again, we need public comment.
Yeah, sorry, we got carried away here, but there's a yes. Anyone wish to comment on our budget? Our proposed budget? No one? All right. Well, staff will be bringing that back in June, and we'll have a public hearing at that time. And
just point of clarification, was there a motion to establish a subcommittee or appoint members of that committee to work with staff on this?
Director Early moves to establish a subcommittee around the salary study.
all right.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to have a board subcommittee dealing with compensation issues. We'll leave it simply stated.
So in terms of point of process, would the board also need to appoint the people as part of the motion?
Yes, 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 if you're gonna do an ad hoc, then you wanna go ahead and.
Do I hear volunteers wishing to serve on that subcommittee?
Yeah, I'm happy to volunteer.
I will too.
Okay, then Director Early and Director Frericks on to serve on that committee. We'll incorporate that in the motion that they would be appointed at this time. This would be ad hoc.
Yes.
This committee would basically have a maximum life of 1 year at this point. That be appropriate?
Well, it probably will not be that long, but I think we'll have a better idea once you get into the salary study and things. I've heard it's expected to be done in September, but it's certainly no longer than 1 year.
All right, then they will, the understanding is they will study the issue. I think it's important whenever I'm on a JPA or a district to be aware of what's happening in my own city, you know, because we're always concerned, you know, about precedent. And that's one of the reasons why we feel this has to be dealt with sensitively, sometimes in confidence. All right, is the motion understood by everyone? Is it approved by council?
Yes.
You're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Nay.
You're opposed?
Okay, I'm gonna turn your mic on.
Okay, it's a 4-1 vote. You didn't speak to your opposition.
It's okay.
All right, we'll accept the loyal opposition, 4-1. All right, turning to the agenda, let's see where we are now. Okay, item number 7 is the Woodland Microtransit Service Plan. And
so maybe just to start us off with a drop of context. So we already talked about the microtransit service policy. That's for all of our service, right? Including our existing service. This is about the future Woodland service. And once again, we're not asking for your vote tonight. We're asking for your input tonight, and then we're taking it to the Woodland City Council and then bringing it back to you for a vote in June.
Yeah. All right, we'll go to the next slide.
And start pouring this water on me to cool down.
So kind of as Autumn was saying was that for the past 6 months, I'll kind of carry on. YoloTD staff have been working doing outreach and working with City of Woodland staff to identify needs and priorities that would help be suitable for implementing a microtransit service for City of Woodland. Within that, we've taken feedback from City of Woodland staff and from the public and have come up with 3 alternatives that we are proposing now, like as Autumn said, for your view to look at. These are by no means final, but we felt that they cover some of the concerns that we've heard in regards to costs, in regards to areas in which to operate service for microtransit, and then the number of vehicles that would be used. And so with that, and incorporating the fact that we will be using RideCo as our kind of system for implementing microtransit service, I'll go to the next slide to kind of go over each of the proposals and like why we have them. So for starters, we have our what is called the preferred alternative. This will be this has the most, just at a high level, this has the most hours of service, the most vehicles in operation at peak. It has the most total hours that will be operated, and it has the highest estimated cost. Also with the lowest average wait time of 10 to 15 minutes. And then with the factors of what RIDECO used on their end and the service area map that we've given them, they've kind of provided us an estimates of ridership Monday through Thursday, or for all 7 days, but specifically Monday through Thursday, 185 to 230 riders, Friday, 225 to 280 riders per day, Saturday, 100 to 125 rides per day, and then Sunday, 80 to 110. Based on our earlier discussions of what we've had in regards to fares, some of the things that I can do just to kind of provide more context before when we meet again is be able to kind of have a better dollar per cost for the rider in regards to each alternative. So we don't have that currently with what's presented, but that is something I can provide you guys for the next time. And so with that, I guess before going into each alternative, I'll kind of leave it open if you guys want to kind of highlight certain sections, but obviously with the preferred, it's going to be the most expensive, but it's going to offer the best in terms of service throughout the weekdays and with nights going till 11 p.m. on both Friday and Saturday. And so if there's no questions, I can kind of just go. Okay.
When you say preferred alternative, that's this staff here, not the staff in the city of Woodland.
Correct. We're talking about in terms of the quality of service going from most hours in operation, and then each subsequent proposal just has a decline in service hours or in the vehicles that are operating or in service. So we can go Heather to the next one. So for this alternative, we have what is the cost constrained. It comes in at a total annual cost of under $1 million. We have service hours that are about 9,000 as opposed to the preferred alternative, which is 12,000. And then in addition with performance, you're gonna have a slightly longer wait time of 20 to 30 minutes. And then with a bigger decline in terms of estimated ridership Monday through Sunday. And so again, based on what the feedback we had received, it was instead of saying, here's the one idea that we have to propose, we have heard comments in terms of costs associated with operation of service. So being mindful with that, giving just different options. And so we'll go to the next slide, Heather, which is the last one. So this is the third alternative. This would be the most fiscally conservative, or not the most fiscally conservative. This change specifically goes from an increase from three vehicles from the cost constraint to 4, but it still has less hours than the preferred alternative. It is a slightly reduced cost of under $1 million when compared to the preferred alternative. And the differences between alternative 3 and the preferred is that it has a slightly higher, in addition, it has a slightly higher average wait time of about 15 to 20 minutes, and then slightly lower ridership estimates based on what we received from RIDECO. It still offers 7 to 11 service Friday and Saturday, but has reduced service Monday through Thursday going to 6 p.m. And then on Sunday, it has reduced service again, starting at 8 and then ending at 6 p.m. So really, this was a way for us to kind of play with some of the numbers in terms of trying to see how we can maximize service frequency throughout the week while still incorporating cost and then giving customers, you know, a very comparative service in terms of wait time and what we expect in terms of riders to use microtransit on roughly a daily basis and the capacity that we could support it. And so just providing some comments from our advisory group. We'll go to the next slide. So within the proposal, we also have 2 area maps that we're proposing for the city of Woodland. Zone map option 1 includes the entire area within the city of Woodland. And then we'll go to the next slide. We have our next option, which is zone map 2. The difference being is that it takes out that industrial section, but still both zone map options are what we're kind of pitching in terms of area of the locations in which passengers within the city of Woodland would be able to get picked up and dropped off. And so I think I'm going to kind of touch on the kind of
sure, yeah, just to say, so if you go back to the previous map, zone map number 1, which is the entire city of Woodland, what you see is the kind of the northeast quadrant of the city, kind of everything to the north and east of I-5. Those little white bubbles are like key destinations that we know are trip generators. You know, it's grocery stores, schools, job centers, hospitals, et cetera. There's not a lot of them out there. It's a fairly low density industrial area. And so the thought is, you know, with the second option is by kind of taking that out, at least initially for the launch, what you would have is you'd have, you know, those vehicles staying in a smaller service area, which means they're not traveling as far, so they're more available for more trips and carrying more people within the kind of urban core, if you will, of Woodland. You know, we always could have the potential to expand out there, but you know, the land use that in that area is not very conducive, frankly, to transit. The one exception, or the one thing that has come up in, you know, the CAC brought it up at their meeting last week and has come up, is the Fourth and Hope facility, which is out on the very, very edge of town, the kind of the most northeast corner of the town, about as far out as you can get, would be excluded from this area if we were to go with option 2, where we excluded the industrial area. That really being the kind of the one major destination that we've heard that people may be trying to access with this service.
I want to mention that they have 2 vans and make regular runs with their vans. Both of them provided in part by the city of Woodland. I'm only concerned about people getting to work. You know, that's our major job center.
So I think we did have one more slide.
Oh wait, what's the major job center? I just want to make sure.
The northeast, that's where the industrial area is.
Okay.
People work there.
Yeah.
Nice. And so we'll go to the next slide on after this one, Heather. And so this is just some of the feedback that we received from both the advisory committee and city staff that kind of helped develop these three alternatives that we're kind of talking about today. And so just at a high level from the city of Woodland, they were very curious about the long-term fiscal sustainability of implementing microtransit service, considering the costs. Even the lowest alternative was about $700,000. And when you look at that over a period of time, there's still some unknowns that we aren't sure in terms of, you know, how will this be taken with the riders and the public? How high will demand be? Will there be a need for more? And so they just wanted to make sure that in terms of how they're looking at their budget, having an idea of if the demand does increase to a point where we need to use more funds, that we're just in communication with them, and that there might be like some further discussions that need to be had. And so with that in mind, that's kind of what helped fuel the 3 alternatives. So we weren't just saying that microtransit is only at one cost and kind of take it or leave it. The other comment that we had was that they were supportive of the preferred alternative, but like I said, they would want to revisit after the implementation of microtransit over at least the next few months, and then maybe going into future discussions with the budget if that needs to like have some more conversation. But they were supportive of at least what YoloTD is trying to do, and with specifically the preferred alternative. With the Citizens Advisory Committee, within that, they all voted unanimously kind of with the preferred alternative. They felt that if we were to support microtransit, it's better to do it full-heartedly and really put their backing behind it. And so with that, they really were in support of the also the preferred alternative. And I believe that concludes the last slide sorry. So yeah, in terms of next steps, so this is just kind of a timeline that I wanted to put to remind from where we started to where we are now, and kind of Autumn brought it up in the beginning. So after this, we will we have the 3 proposals we have presented the 3 alternatives for you. We'll be meeting with the city of Woodland at their city council meeting to also go over this. We will be incorporating the feedback from you guys in preparation for our meeting in June. And then with that, we hope that you would adopt, based on the discussions that we've had, one of the 3 alternatives. And then we're looking that we'll have the vehicles before August and to potentially implement service within August. We also need to make sure that we'll have the driver's schedule as well. But those are the tentative kind of timelines for what we're looking at in terms of implementation for Woodland Micro.
Is that August, September objective based on any feedback we've gotten from the manufacturers?
Yes, yes, the date keeps slipping out, but we actually have, I think Daniel and Chad are heading down there next week to go look at those vehicles, 4 of the 8 vehicles, and install some equipment. So those 4 we were feeling pretty confident about. We hope to have 8 vehicles to launch the service, but I don't think we yet have a confirmation on when the other 4 are going to be delivered. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, there may even be a partial rollout pending vehicle and driver availability.
Okay, we have some questions from our board, please.
So I have a few. I wanted to make sure I was following the map correctly. So does our microtransit here, and I'll call it ours because it's YoloTD, does it take you throughout Woodland, meaning, for instance, Via will drop you off a mile or so from your home, right? If not at your, like around your home. Is that exactly what this microtransit is doing as well?
More than that, actually.
Are you talking about the geographic boundaries or how close it gets you to your destination?
How close it gets you, because I saw lots of bubbles throughout there, and I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm understanding it's not just the bubbles that are called out, right? It's
door to door.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure I was following that. The other question I had was just I was wanting to make sure I understood from Woodland's perspective. The city of Woodland is not right now. This is a pilot program, right? And they're not being asked to set aside or contribute any dollars to this. It's all coming from the big pot that is YoloTD.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So then do you think the main concern as you're talking to Woodland City staff on just the different options that they imagine a few years from now? I think, Chair, to your point that it's hard to take something away once you've given it, so they want to make sure this is sustainable. I'm trying to understand the concern.
Is a concern. Yes, that is part of the concern. This is where we saw the 6-month funding and the budget. And, it's deceptive if you look at the budget and not realize it's going to be double that number once it's on an annual basis. So we need to understand we've got a built-in $500,000 essentially that's going to be in addition for subsequent years. And we're all very protective of the very limited funds we have in our cities to do some of the things we need to do. So that's why we're watching with some concern. We want this service. We cut back local fixed route service before you got on the board. There were 4 lines originally, and now we have 2. So we've been economizing to be able to reprogram money to do this. And of course, this isn't, our situation is somewhat different from yours because it's exclusively for your community. Ours is designed also to be able to work with both Nice Landing and Winters. So that's why it's requiring a lot of discussion. Because our situations are a little not necessarily equivalent, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. West Sacramento led on this, and so I agree that we were an innovator in this.
And you did it really quickly, too. You deserve a lot of credit.
Nimble but determined.
In the country.
Last question. So I understand. The idea that we have pushed this out so far because of just the fact that we didn't have the vehicles is not great, right? But understand that we have just been a victim of the market. I'm just wondering, have we thought about potential alternatives, even as much as a long-term lease for a year of vehicles or something along those lines, so that if we don't have the other 4 and say another 6 months, we can't just keep pushing it out, particularly because I did understand before I got on here that we had taken out 2 fixed routes and it can only continue to go on for so long.
So, the vehicle delay, that's only the last 6 months. I mean, the fact that the service was discontinued before I started. So it's been a long process. There was the procurement to hire Rideco took, I want to say 15 or 16 months. There's something going on in that industry where the 2 leaders in the industry, including the ones in West Sacramento, they challenge procurements and file lawsuits. And so we were in the crosshairs of one of those. And so we had to make sure we did everything above and beyond with that procurement process. So it was a very protracted procurement process, but I think we had a positive outcome. We did have a fair amount of staff turnover. The lead staff for this project left June of 2022, or somewhere thereabout. So we've had.
I'm just
some
wondering if
challenges on
there's some
So-
alternatives, if.
I just want to be
reason-
transparent about
Oh,
all
yeah.
the things.
I-
And there was multiple board conversations last summer about what to do about this vehicle situation, where we explored a number of different options. We were looking at purchasing secondhand vehicles. Part of the challenge is because of FTA requirements, we have to be very, very careful about how we prepare vehicles and how those vehicles, what kinds of vehicles we're able to use.
So there is no plan B. Plan B is you continue to wait if whatever reason come September, not all 8 are available.
At the moment, there's no plan B.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay. Director Lauren? Okay, sure. All right, thank you. That concludes our discussion for tonight. It's been a long road, and eventually there'll be a bus on that road.
I just want to add one quick comment, which I just wanted to thank the staff for the work on it. I mean, I think, right, we know, sort of logistics issues that have taken place. We know there's been some staff changes as well too, but also, I mean, some of this stuff is completely out of our hands, like especially the inability to obtain vehicles. And we're not the only agency experiencing a similar situation, but just really want to, both on this item and the previous item, want to thank Courtney for his work on both items.
Thank you. I concur completely. It's some of it's been easy, but most of it's been pretty hard as we try to bring this agency great distance in a short amount of time. For my colleagues' benefit, we couldn't even buy the buses we really wanted. I mean, they're not available, and there was no timeline for their becoming available. So we're buying what is available.
It's not actually available, but.
Yeah.
I said, well, it's actually not available, but.
It's almost Chair Stallard, I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure too that.
Public comment.
Yes.
Anyone want to speak on this issue? No, no one wishes to speak.
Just make sure we get.
Thank you
everybody.
for beating with a stick if I forget again, will you? All right, so that takes us to our final action here tonight, which is I made the preliminary zero emission bus rollout plan. Okay, Courtney, you're getting a lot of airtime.
Yeah. All right.
That's why they need those 7% raises.
So, all right, well, thank you all. We're at the close of this. So just want to recap. So for the preliminary, what you guys have in front of you is preliminary draft for the zero emission bus rollout plan. Just for some context of what I had presented prior. What I given you before was the schedule for when we plan to purchase our zero emission buses for paratransit and fixed route. The remaining sections that are completed that I'll be going over today include some additional information that I added for section C, which is a profile for the zero emission technology portfolio. Section D, which is our current fleet composition and future bus purchases. Section E, facilities and infrastructure modifications. Section F, providing service for disadvantaged communities. Section G, which is the workforce training schedule. Section H, potential funding sources identified. And Section I, the startup and scale of challenges. And just as a reminder for this report, this is a CARB requirement that shows that YoloTD is on their way to actually planning for procuring zero emission buses to meet the ICT ruling, which is that all transit agencies have converted their fleet to zero emissions by 2040. And so you know, the next slide, Heather.
And just to tell you why we're torturing you with all of this stuff tonight, it's because like this is literally due to ARB next month. So you know, we just had a convergence of major important topics tonight, and we just really appreciate all the board's input and attention to all of these important issues, as well as staff's.
We're not letting anything by without the rules.
My job.
Good for you.
And so I covered this kind of in my intro, so we can go to the next slide. And so where we're at with the timeline. So right now I'm presenting to you the draft for YoloTD. I presented last week to the advisory committee based on your input after I present and the time that we have to review. I will have this next month to incorporate any of the additional information that you guys are recommending or any questions you have regarding this document. We will be presenting this at June, looking for your approval at June if everything is covered the way you guys need it. And then it'll be sent off to CARB, who will then need to review it and have just an approved board resolution. And then after that, once CARB approves, we will have met our requirement. So we're still on our timeline. Just wanted to recap that. We go to the next slide. So this was some of the additional information that I added just at a high level. And what this is for is to really explain all the total trips that YoloTD has. This is across our weekend service and weekday service and the range of miles that those trips are. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of charging of the range for electric buses is about 200 miles, 250 miles. And this is in today's current technology, meaning that we expect it to get better and the capacity and charging times to increase. So based on that today, we currently have about 5 trips that we operate based on existing service that if we somehow manage to be 100% zero emission tomorrow, that we would still need to find another way to kind of make sure that those charging times are not impacting service. So that's just to inform you that from YoloTD, our routes are in compliance with the charging technology for zero emission buses. We can go to the next slide. Oh, that's terrible. I apologize. So what this really, and I can talk about this too, is really explaining what CARB's requirement is to know is that we have a plan for improving our infrastructure. So YoloTD, we have our main headquarters maintenance facility here on site. And then we also have a backup facility at Harbor, which we use to store some of our buses when we need to kind of shorten the trips that we're having drivers who are driving the West Sacramento service. So with that, this is a very high level proposed plan of how we plan to implement our improving our facility modifications to support zero emission technology. What that would require is building solar canopy for this yard here and for the Harbor yard, battery storage, so that way we have some resiliency for if there are certain issues that arise, and knowing that how much energy that would require, that would dictate the amount of batteries we need in case of emergency. In addition to that, there are electrical infrastructure upgrades in addition for charging stations. So we have, based on the current service that we provide and the number of spaces, we would be able to use all our existing spaces within this lot to have charging stations to charge electric buses. So that is a good thing, but there's still more work to be done. This by no means solves the planning aspect that will be continuing on further. This is both to provide you guys and CARB with our estimated schedule and the components that we're looking at that would need to be upgraded at a high level for our facility. And so I just want to make that clear because while this is a planning document, this is more of a high level planning document for CARB having a series of questions that need to be answered and not a deeper look at the engineering components and specifications that would really explain in detail the cost of the chargers, how they'd be set up, the canopy, the stages of procurement for even getting that technology. So I just want to make that clear with like the expectations of what we're providing with CARB and the future work that will need to take place post this planning document being approved.
Also, whenever the federal government issues a mandate, all of a sudden it creates artificial demand and prices go up and delays go up. And of course, this presumes we have enough energy being delivered to these sites, which means PG&E has to bring in more capability, and they're not easy to work with either. But we have a tough road ahead of us to do this.
Yeah, you know, but gotta go through it. So that's kind of how my view is. There's money out there and we've got a good team and we just got to go through the process.
Are you thinking we would start getting the charging infrastructure in place even while we work to get a rolling thought?
So I think, yes, we would, but to answer you on a deeper level, we're still going to need to, we're gonna have to be talking with our head of IT, who's also going to be working with understanding what are the infrastructure needs that we're going to have to go into scaling up to install chargers and how many chargers we're going to need. And because that ties in the type of buses that we're looking to procure as well, in addition to the battery and solar. So I guess to answer your question, yes, we are planning to do both simultaneously, but we're still in the very early stages of getting to that point. Really the priority will be looking at probably the engineer that we use to design this facility and kind of go back to the table because we still have those blueprints to then say, all right, we know that we have a need to go zero emission. We know the total amount of buses we're going to procure is 48. And we know that our schedule to procure is based on the useful life of our CNG buses. So we don't need to buy everything at once. we can phase the installation of our infrastructure improvements as well. So that's what our plan will be. Just to kind of at a high level explain that, yes, we plan to kind of do both, but it'll be done in phases.
Got it.
So that way we're not constraining ourselves financially or over promising before.
When will we see the funding to for this infrastructure?
Yeah,
I know he's got some slides on that coming.
Is there more in the presentation?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Go with the slide.
So we'll go to the next slide.
I realize
They have a city council meeting, Gary. Get it going, it's 8:15.
So this is a picture of our blueprint of the current facility here at headquarters. And I have it highlighted in 3 sections because we have what is the yellow, which covers the administrative and bus maintenance. The red, which covers parking for buses, our bus wash, our fueling station, and parking for paratransit. And then the remaining space, which we have, is kind of like a recreational yard and where most of our buses are stored in our second CNG facility. And so just breaking out the components to kind of see the different phases of work that'll need to be completed. And then also just showing at a high level the current bus space that we have with the amount of buses that we're going to be operating at 48 moving forward. So we're going to have the space requirements. It's really going to be a matter of how are we going to re-engineer the sections and how, at what steps will that be done. And highlighting it in 3 sections just makes it a bit easier than just looking at one image, trying to pinpoint it. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. This is just an aerial view. We don't have blueprints of the West Sacramento facility. This would also need to have infrastructure upgrades for charging, dispatch, as well as kind of engineering the spacing and making sure that the road is actually level. We also need to look at like kind of purchasing or agreements with City of West Sac, but just wanted to highlight these are the 2 locations that we're going to be prioritizing for our conversion to zero emission. Next slide. This is just a requirement from CARB. It's explaining if we have disadvantaged communities within our service area, when would we estimate that buses would be operating in them, and do any currently operate. We do not have any zero emission buses that currently operate. They're all tied to 138. This is just an estimate of when we think within the procurement schedule, we'll start receiving some that would operate, which is currently 2026. We can go to the next slide. This is, apologize for not being able to see it, but this section is one of the newer sections that I added that especially explains the workforce development strategy for moving, for actually being able to have the correct maintenance staff with the expertise to understand working on zero emission buses. Luckily, we just hired someone who has some expertise through kind of the transit contract, although they overlook all of kind of the transit operators that are contracted with Transdev. We do have that person as a resource who will be able to train our maintenance staff. And we have 6 Proteras currently that he will be assisting in terms of getting our maintenance staff up to speed on how to actually run diagnostics, troubleshoot for mechanical issues. And so roughly the plan of how we look at is within 2023, we were beginning to start some of that preliminary training. And then as we move through 2024 and 2025, that we'll have the appropriate amount of maintenance staff to service zero emission buses moving forward. Next slide. So now I have the list of identified funding sources. This is broken down. Green are essentially the formula-based funding sources that we can count on. The ones that aren't highlighted are discretionary, meaning ones we would have to apply. I've broken this slide into 3 sections. So this just covers at a high level some of the federal sources. Go to the next slide. These are the state sources. Again, green highlighted for blanking formula funds. And then at the bottom, we have local funding included as just what we've identified currently for funding sources to tap into. Next slide. And so some of the issues I just included within the report are challenges with service operations during extreme weather scenarios. This is just asked by CARB. So for agencies, as we're planning to roll out and look for planning for zero emission vehicles and the conversion, what are some of the issues that we forecast? And so energy density and trade-off of battery capacity constraints really tied to understanding the long-term effects if we don't see improvement in charging and battery and disposal, how that'll be another factor of planning that agencies, including ours, will need to take into account. current and future electricity costs, and then planning for long-term battery storage. Again, if energy costs continue to increase, that can directly affect our costs for fueling the vehicles, even with solar charging. So that's also why we're looking at battery storage as ways to kind of offset not being entirely exposed to market prices. And I believe this is the last slide. Next slide. There's no next slide. And that kind of concludes the remaining amount of the zero emission bus plan and the ads.
I
think Courtney gets 3 months off. All right. Board, you've been very patient tonight. Is there any last word?
I have one quick comment on this particular presentation, actually, and just the action on that last slide, which is, I think, one item that was sort of referenced earlier by, I think, a couple of us, but I think it's really important, is the issues around the inability for potential capacity expansion, right, by the utility. I mean, like, there's all these other variables that are sort of more on YOLO bus and YOLO YTD. There is the one variable that we don't control is PG&E's ability to provide adequate amounts of infrastructure and or additional generation. I mean, that's a real challenge. We're seeing them, communicate with other jurisdictions around the state that they have an inability to add additional new houses, new, you name it, in terms of infrastructure upgrades, because they don't have enough capacity. So that's a real concern. I mean, on September 10th last year, when it was 116 degrees at 4 p.m. and they turned off the city of West Sacramento and the city of Davis because they didn't want there to be a blackout or brownout, and they just, voluntarily, turned off the power in both of those two communities, the hottest day of the year, the hottest hours of the year. That's a real challenge for everything, including. So
we'll be talking about generators and batteries, right?
I really appreciate everything that the supervisor just said. I would just add that I really appreciate the climate resilience portion of getting the new CNG, because we know on those really high heat days we've had the Protera problems. So I think it's well done.
Putting the finer point on it is this, like, I think we should add that to our report, right? If we're going to send a report like this that's required by the state of California, we should make sure the state of California knows that, like, clearly our challenges, and they're not just, again, our agency's challenges. There's a real challenge that many other jurisdictions are facing due to the market not operating well or correctly.
And climate change.
Yeah.
Madam Executive Director, any remaining comments for tonight?
Well, I want to make sure we get public comment on this item.
Yeah.
And I will just also add, I want to appreciate that I know that this board and the Valley Clean Energy Board share, I think, 3 members. So you guys are violating quorum at this meeting every time you're at that meeting. But we had several of you suggested that
we don't talk buses when we're VCE.
Well, you may after this, because Courtney had a conversation with Mitch Sears over there about potential synergies between our need to electrify and upgrade this facility and some of the things you all are doing over there. So that's very helpful. We're looking forward to partnering with them.
Thank you. Now, was there any public comment on this issue before we conclude? All right, thank you. As our agenda observes, we are meeting again next month on June 12th, again at 6 p.m. at this location. We hope everybody has a good month in the meantime. And again, Zach, you worked really hard to put this meeting together for us. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.